The next lesson that you're going to be working on is a lesson that is specifically focused upon depicting space or the illusion of depth on a two-dimensional surface. Now, just for a quick review, all depiction of space, whenever you're trying to make depth or space on a picture, you're always going to have what four things? Four things from the previous lesson. That being the background, the area that is farthest away from you. The area that is farthest away from you is generally closer towards the top of the picture. Your middle ground, which is in front of the background that is closer towards the middle of the picture, and then the foreground. The foreground is the section or area that is closest to you, and those are generally at the bottom of the picture. You've got the background, middle ground, and foreground with overlapping. With those four things, you're already on the path to start to make the illusion of depth in space on your piece of paper or on any two-dimensional surface. But there's other things, there's other rules that go along with this. That's what we're really going to get into now. What you're going to find is these other rules that we're going to be talking about, they play directly into the background, the middle ground, and the foreground, and overlapping. It all works together in one cohesive way so that you're able to really use these rules to create that illusion of depth and space on a flat surface. So the first thing that we use to create the illusion of space is proportion. Now, what proportion refers to, it's the size, the relative size of each of the objects in the picture. And basically what proportion says is that the closer an object to you is, the larger it's going to appear. The farther away an image gets from you, the smaller it appears. So when you look at this painting and you see this woman that's standing right here in the front, she is in the foreground. She is the foreground of the picture and actually is the subject of the picture because she's smack dab right in the middle of the picture plane. The trees are framing her in nice, and the picture in itself has an interesting story about it. But when you look at it, you can tell that she is closer to you for two main reasons. Number one, you see that she is gigantic, especially in comparison to the rest of the people, and even the mountains back in the back and the houses back in the back. You know that this lady is not some 50-foot tall giant and isn't 10 times taller than all of these buildings. You know that. That is your eye looking at it and your brain really analyzing this and seeing that she is closer to you because she is larger. That is all proportion is all about. The closer an object is to you, the larger it appears. The smaller an object is to you, or smaller an object is, the farther it gets away from you. Which is why the houses and the mountains and even these people are much, much smaller, noticeably smaller than her. Doesn't mean that she's giant, it just means that she's closer to you. The next rule is placement. Now, placement really goes hand in hand with the idea of the background, the middle ground, and the foreground. What placement says is the closer an object is to you, the farther down on the picture plane, the closer to the bottom of the picture plane that person is going to, or that object is going to end up being. So when you look at this picture of the ballerina dancers, you've got this lady here and even this lady here. They are closest to you because you can see that they are further down on the picture plane. The farther away they get, the smaller they get, which is proportion, but also the further up the picture plane they move. So if you look at this, you could dissect this into background, middle ground, foreground very, very easily. The foreground is this group of ladies right in here. The middle ground, which is further away, is back this far, and then the background would be the curtains in the back of the stage. So you can see placement and proportion go hand in hand to each other. They absolutely work together, but at the same time, placement and proportion works hand in hand with the background, the middle ground, and the foreground as well. The third thing that we use is perspective. And what perspective refers to is how an object appears and changes over great big long distances. What perspective really gets into is mostly like geometric shapes. When you look at this drawing, you can tell that this canal in this sci-fi kind of drawing, I mean, they look like they're on a spaceship or something like that, that when you look at it, that this canal stretches back for miles and miles and miles, all the way back until you can't even see where that is. This is the exact same kind of concept as when you're driving on a straight road. If you're in a car trip and you're driving through the Midwest, through Iowa or Nebraska or something like that, and you're on a road that goes for miles and miles and miles, this is what you see. You see that the edges of the road end up going and converging back to one point back in the back. What this is dealing with is the placement of the horizon line and the vanishing point being the one section where all of these lines end up converging. Now, for the lesson that we're going to be working on this week, we're really not going to be dealing a lot with perspective. Perspective is a really, really tricky lesson that we will be dealing with further on into the next couple of lessons that we're working on. This is just a heads up for you to, hey, this is going to be coming down the pike. And then finally, you've got atmospheric perspective. Now, watch out. This is on your test. Atmospheric perspective refers to how an object looks farther away, and the farther away it gets, the less detail and the less color you're able to see because of a lot of different things. If you're looking at something that's miles and miles and miles away, if you're looking at, I like to look at mountains. If you see mountains that are super, super far away and they seem faded, they seem washed out, that's because in the air between you and that object that you're looking at, dozens and dozens of miles away, there's particles of moisture, there's particles of dust, there's things in the air that you can't see. And what that does is it ends up masking the object that you're looking at, so it seems like it's washed out and it's almost semi-transparent, or not transparent, but kind of foggy looking. That is atmospheric perspective. And atmospheric perspective first came about in the Renaissance time, and it's the use of atmospheric perspective in paintings and in art. This dates back way back to the 1400s. So this is a very, very traditional style of depicting things that are far away. So what I want you to do is go right now at the end of this video. Instead of asking questions, I want you to find examples of placement, proportion, perspective, and atmospheric perspective. Go to Google Images. You can go to the Google homepage, click on the tab up on the top that says Google Images, and just type in those terms: proportion in art, perspective in art, that kind of thing. Or you can even, another good thing to do is you can do searches for landscapes, landscapes, cityscapes, things like that. Find some pictures that are examples of proportion, placement, perspective, and atmospheric perspective. Now, you can do two things. You can either, once you find that picture in your sketchbook, you can draw a quick sketch of what that picture is and write an explanation of how that is a good example of the proportion or placement or whichever one of these rules you're trying to find an example of. Or you can just go ahead, if you don't want to draw it, you can go ahead and just print those examples out, staple them or glue them into, just staple them into your sketchbook, and then right next to them, write an explanation of how it is a good example of these elements of space. Now, when I say write an explanation, I want more than one sentence. I want more than it's a good example because she's close. Give me a minimum of 3 sentences for each of these examples, explaining how this is a good example of the element of space. If you have any questions about this, feel free to come and talk to me during class, and there you go.